Welcome to SAS, short and sweet tips for the business sector from the Case Mastermind Group. So welcome everybody to the SAS Entrepreneur Show, where SAS represents short and sweet, a place where you can get easy and straight to the point tips and topics around your entrepreneurial journey. So I'm your host today, Patrick Twitchett. My guest today, Claire Farley, started her career as a legal secretary, mainly in commercial litigation, working at senior partner level for some of the biggest law firms in the UK. After around 20 years and the birth of her daughter, she started as a PA in the company Untapped Potential. She was then promoted to campaign manager and then subsequently head of recruitment, and was appointed as a director in 2017. Since April this year, she has been co-owner and managing director of Untapped Potential. So, hello, Claire Farley.
Hello, nice to be with you.
It's great to have you with us today. Before we go further, can you please briefly explain what Untapped Potential actually do?
I certainly can. So Untapped Potential Recruitment offers an alternative solution to recruitment via very different methods to the standard recruitment methods that people use. By standard, I mean traditional in the sense of reading a CV and inviting somebody to come for a standard one-to-one interview. We don't believe that that is the best way to recruit the key people for your organisation. And so what we've developed is a very unique and innovative approach, I would say, to recruitment, where we bring all of the candidates together. So instead of you seeing everybody on an individual on a one-to-one basis, what we actually do is bring all of the best candidates together, which means that you get to see them all at the same time. You're putting them all through the same process. And you get to see what they're like, not only whether they can do the job, but actually what are they like as people, which actually is really, really just as important today as it is for them to have the right skills to do the job. So it's a fairer process, not only for the client, but for the candidate as well, because they're getting to see what the business is also like.
Yeah, sure. No, absolutely. Excellent. So I understand that you have some tips for us today. So please tell us what subject are they going to be based around, please?
So the subjects that are, I mean, there's lots of subjects that you need to get right when it comes to recruitment, but these are the four really that for us are absolutely essential to get it right. So it starts obviously with your advert. So advertising is one of the subjects I'm going to talk about today. I'm also going to talk about how to read CVs fast and effectively. I'm also going to talk about how to assess candidates other than just doing standalone interviews. And then I'm also going to talk about inductions and what's the best way to send the right first impression when you're bringing people into your organisation.
Okay, excellent. All right, well, if you'd like to start off number one, as they always say, that would be fantastic.
Sure. So my first tip is around advertising. Now people fall into the trap with advertising of thinking that they can just stick any old advert out there and expect the right people to come along and apply for that job. And what a wonderful world it would be if that was the case. But our tip with advertising is, look, this is your first touch point to potentially your new employee. And so therefore you want to get this absolutely right. The other thing to mention is that 85% now of job seekers are searching online. So you need to make sure you're placing your advert first of all. Even before you've decided what you're going to place in your advert, you need to decide where you're going to place that advert. But there are some absolute must-haves that you must get right in your advert. And first of all, obviously, you want to make sure you've got a job title that's searched upon. People can call their preferred candidate whatever they want when they get them, but let's make sure we're calling it something popular on the job boards, and then somebody will actually find it. The other tip is, please make sure you do put on there the salary. A lot of people fall into the trap nowadays of putting competitive salary. Our belief is that you need to give people an indication of what they're going to be paid. Competitive can mean very different things to very different people. So you need to give people certainly an idea, and a bracket is absolutely fine. So a from and a to, or a circa, but something on there in terms of salary. Obviously, you need to be telling people where the job is as well. So job title, salary, and location are absolute must-haves for us. But the three most important things: who you are, what business you're in, what the job actually entails, and what experience the person needs to have. Those are the three things. Those are the three paragraphs that we always have in our adverts. Something else that we always have in our adverts as well are personal characteristics. So what's the style of the person going to be that's going to be able to do this job? You can have the best CV in the world with the best skill set, but if your values and your working style and your personality doesn't match that of the organisation, and vice versa actually, then it's a complete waste of time. And actually statistics do now show that when people are having to be gotten rid of, or you're having to terminate someone's employment, it's usually because of fit and because of culture mismatch. And so therefore you need to be thinking about that when you are approaching any kind of recruitment, and certainly from your adverts perspective, advertise for those as well. We call them ideal skills and qualities. You can call them whatever you want. You can call them personal characteristics, but make sure you put those in the advert as well.
Sure. Okay. So being very clear, very specific, and that's really good. There's a lot of things that people miss off, isn't there?
There are a lot of things that people miss off, and there are a lot of things that people do as well, which is around too much technical jargon. What you have to remember is you're competing on an online job board with hundreds of other vacancies that look and sound very similar to yours. And so what you're trying to do here is you're trying to make your advert stand out from the rest. And so therefore it needs to be very clear, it needs to be very concise, and the candidates need to be able to find the information they're looking for very quickly.
Sure. Because we're in an age now that it's about low friction for people to interact online. It's about ease of access, and almost as soon as something becomes anything other than completely simple, people just switch off and move on, don't they? It's become very...
People will just, absolutely. Candidates particularly are becoming very, very picky. They've got their pick of the crop now with online job boards and with roles that will be very similar to yours. And so if you miss off any of that stuff that I've just mentioned, the likelihood is that a candidate will just move on and go on to the next vacancy that's far more easier to read than yours.
Yes. Very true indeed. Very true indeed. So what would you sum up for advertising for people then?
Be clear. Give candidates the information that they want, and that needs to be clear, and it needs to be concise, and it needs to be easy to read. Put yourself in the perspective of the candidate, and just try and think what you're looking for. If you're looking for something on the net, you want it to be easy to understand and clear and concise.
Yeah, sure, and I like that. You're the guinea pig. If you go on there, like as an applicant, or even ask somebody else to go on there as an applicant and have a look, it's a great way of testing it before it goes out there in the marketplace, isn't it? Yeah, okay, excellent.
Yeah, that's right. You sense check it yourself.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Okay, so does that lead us up nicely to tip number 2?
It does. Leads in very nicely to my second tip, which is around sifting of CVs. We have been doing this for a very long time, and so we tend to receive anywhere from around 100 to 350 applications per vacancy, which tends to mean that we need to have a process to be able to read them, and read them fairly, and read them fast, but also effectively, because you want to make sure that you are reading them fairly. You know, it's if someone's taken the trouble to apply for the job, you at least want to treat everybody fairly.
Yes.
So the way that we do it, is we have a list. We have a list of criteria. So this is my tip around, before you start reading CVs, have a list of what are the absolute must-haves here. What do these candidates need to absolutely bring in terms of skills and experience? What are the absolute critical factors that I need to see in this CV? And then also have maybe 2 or 3 things that are sort of nice to have as well. So you want to keep your list to a maximum. We would suggest a maximum of around 8 things. And then literally score each person against that list that you've come up with. If you do that, it focuses your mind much more against what you're looking for in a CV, rather than just randomly flicking through them and thinking, well, that one looks okay, and well, I'm not sure, I need to go back to that one and compare that one to that one. And you can spend hours upon hours reading CVs if you don't have a clear process of how to do it.
Yeah, sure. And I like that point that you made there. So it's because so many people approach an interview process, you know, a lot of people tend to just go online and Google it and put all this stuff in, and all of a sudden, you know, an interview becomes this thing with about 50 questions and scenarios and all of this, and it just becomes a little bit messy. So I like that point, bringing it down to a focus, up to a maximum of 8 points. That must then get the clarity right, mustn't it?
I mean, when we're working with our customers, obviously we talk to them about, you know, what's important to them. We come up with what we think they should be looking for, and we work in conjunction with them. We liaise with them throughout the whole process. But what you're trying to get to is you're trying to get to spending no more than 1 or 2 minutes per CV, because otherwise, as I've just said, you can just spend hours doing this, and then at the end of it, you're still none the wiser as to whether you've got the right people or not.
Yes, yeah. No, absolutely. So it's obviously a critical area where you're going to try to filter them out, and not over. And because there must be a danger in that process that that you could filter out a really good applicant at too early a stage, couldn't there?
Yeah, we have what's called a reserve list when we're shortlisting people. So we obviously, you know, you have to kind of have some leeway somewhere throughout this process. Yeah. And somebody could score really well in 7 out of the 8 list. And clearly, you've got to have some idea in your own mind of what's the cut-off point for you. Who am I going to allow in? What score am I going to allow for people to be sifted in or sifted out? And then we still have a reserve list. So we invite all of these people, obviously, to come to an assessment day, which is the next topic I'll talk about. But it also makes it a fairer process if a candidate asks you for feedback on their CV. Because if you're saying to somebody, look, I'm really sorry, but you've not been shortlisted on this occasion, 9 times out of 10, they're going to want to understand why. And actually, if you can go back to them and say, well, look, this was the criteria I was given by the client, and your CV didn't demonstrate as much in this area as it did in other areas, and some other candidates were stronger, it helps them to better their CV in the future.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, that's really good. So yeah, there's a bit of a feedback process on both sides, I assume, to the employer, to the candidate. So it's actually helping on both sides of the coin, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so we've got that process there. So tell us a bit more about step number 3.
So step number 3, and our tip number 3 is what we do in terms of how to assess candidates. And as I mentioned right at the beginning of this, we don't believe that standalone interviewing should be the way to bring key people into your business. We completely understand that there is a time and a place for one-to-one interviewing, and of course you've got to spend some one-on-one time with people, but we just don't believe it should be the only thing that you do when you're trying to decide who does and doesn't come into your organisation. So if you go back to what I said earlier around culture fit, it's really difficult if you're doing a standalone one-to-one interview to test whether a person is going to fit into your organisation, and that can be skills or personality wise. And so what you have to try and do then is come up with something that's different to the interview, which is where our assessment days come in. Now clearly, if it's not possible for you to do an assessment day in your organisation, what else can you do? Well, the whole process is designed around human interaction with other people. If you think about when you're doing your job, you're not really sat across a desk answering a series of questions, and that's what interviewing is. When you're doing your job, you're working with other people and you're just getting on with things. And so what we do with our days, our assessment days, is we devise a day that's tailored towards not only the role, but also tailored towards the business as well, and those personal characteristics that we mentioned in the advert at the advert stage. So what can we do then to test for those things that we said were really important to this job? And there's no better way to test whether someone can do a specific skill or have a particular personality trait than to see it live in front of you. Because the other thing to mention about interviewing is, as much as it's a one-to-one process and a very one-sided process, candidates can become very practiced at interview techniques. And so they can answer all the questions in the way that you want them to be answered. And they can do really, really well at an interview, but you've not really got any idea of whether they can do the job or not, because you're having to base your information on what they're telling you. And sometimes what they're telling you isn't necessarily the truth. And they're not quite as good at a certain thing as they think they are. So the best way to do it is to bring everybody together, run a series of exercises, and some exercises will be smaller exercises, some exercises will be skill specific, some will just be more personality wise. But what you'll start to see throughout the day is a thread of that person's characteristics, that person's working style, and you'll start to see a pattern in their behaviour, which you will realise quite quickly will or won't work in your organisation, because you'll absolutely know what does and doesn't work in your organisation. You'll absolutely know what personalities will fit.
Yes, yeah, sure. And I think that is probably, and I think we've spoken about this before, that, you know, you can be a really good salesman and you're selling yourself and, you know, and you are biased when you go to an interview. You think you're going to tell them you're the best thing in the world that's ever happened to them. So, there is, and it's really interesting that you've developed some techniques over the years to get around that, to get around.
Of course, yeah. I mean, what we've done with our days is we kind of have a bunch of exercises, if you like, that we have in our arsenal. You know, we have some tools and tricks that we use all the time and that we always do on every selection day. But of course, there's always the odd exercise that we have to come up with because we've never done that before, or there's a particular style of working that the customer wants to see, and we have to come up with something for them. We do also ask the company as well to come up with a specific exercise that's specific to them, that's a potential issue or a potential challenge or something that's happened once upon a time in the business, just to give the customer an idea of what it actually might be like to see them doing something that's real to that role and real to that business. Which is really more my tip, really. If you can't do a selection day, then just come up with at least one exercise that's part of the interview process where you can see them working with other people, get them working on a real challenge or a real issue, and you'll get much more of an idea of what they're like to work with, and the candidate gets much more of an idea of what you're like to work with as the recruiting company.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's, you know, put a group of people together. You know, the leader comes out fairly soon enough, don't they? And starts telling everybody what to do and coordinating everyone. And then they'll show their style. If they're diplomatic enough, everybody will jump on board, everyone will work together as a team. Or if they're just some little dictator, it's all going to fall to pieces quite quickly.
Absolutely, and you'll see that happen. And we say to people on our selection days, look, getting through this process doesn't mean that you have to be the loudest person in the room. It doesn't mean that you have to be the first person to want to lead an exercise or to jump to the flip chart every single time an exercise is set. That's not what the day is about. The day is about quality of contribution. That's what you're looking for. But you're absolutely right. All of that stuff that you've just mentioned is what comes out in people, because they can't keep up an act like they can in an interview on a full day. And their natural style just comes out because they're that engrossed in whatever it is that we've asked them to do. Their natural style just comes out.
Yes, no, absolutely. Absolutely. So that's brilliant. It's almost bringing everything up to the surface, isn't it? And saying, actually, look, this is the real person starting to show through, which is what you need, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's really what you need. You don't want to be finding that out like a lot of people do 3, 6, 9 months down the road and like, oh my goodness, this person's a nutcase or they get upset and everyone.
Absolutely. You want to kind of get a feel for that well before you've started to, even think about employing this person. You want to think, is this person going to drive me nuts? Or can I work with this person? Are there some things that I'm not sure about, but we can work on? But it just gives you a much better idea. And, it gives the candidate a much better idea of what you're like to work with as well. Because from a candidate's perspective, you have to think about, they're not treated very fairly sometimes through a recruitment process. And so they get sold a job in an interview. And then when they get the job, it's nothing like they thought it was going to be. The people are nothing like they thought they were going to be. The environment isn't anything, the job isn't anything like, and so they get a much, much clearer idea of who this business is, who are these people that I'm going to be working with, because we have 2 to 3 representatives with us on the selection day from the company as well. So they're getting a much clearer picture of who the business actually is.
Yeah. And that's a really good point, because you do want to see what it's going to be like to work at this organisation. It is, your first day is always this sort of, oh, what's it really going to be like? So any sort of drip feed into that, because at the end of the day, you're going to offer an applicant a job, but the applicant's got to want to say yes. So you are selling to each other in that process. And I think it got drummed into me, and I think school was a big advocate of it, that you're selling yourself. You've got to sell yourself to that company. But you're really right, that company's got to sell themselves to you. You've got to buy into that ethos, who they are, what they're about. And, that can be a great deciding stage for both parties.
Of course it can. I mean, that was, that's where I started my working life. It's changed so much. It used to be, why should I employ you, candidate number 1 or 2 or 3? It's very different to that nowadays. And actually, it's been turned completely on its head, where candidates are thinking, well, Mr. Employer, why should I come and work for you? And that's the way of the world. That's the way that the world is going. And so therefore, you've got to be demonstrating that you're doing something different, and that you're prepared to put yourself, as the business, as the recruiting business, you're prepared to put yourself up in front of the candidates and say, well, look, this is who we are.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm very with this. I mean, it's become a modern culture. It should have always been. It's always been there. But there's this culture now of, do what you love, do what you enjoy. And that's all been there. But people are talking about it more now, because people are beginning to realise that, actually, it's not about what's going to pay me the most. It's about, am I going to go to work and enjoy every day, or am I going to go there like, but still a huge majority of people, if we said to them, well, look, if we cut your pay in half, would you still come here? Most people would say no. You know, I'm here for the money.
Exactly.
The number of times I've heard people say, you know, oh, I'd really like to leave this job. I'd like to do this. Oh, why would you like to do that? Because it's more money. And it's like, oh, wow, you know, it's just all about the money. You
Yeah.
can do this job for 50 years possibly, or if the government have their way, probably 60 years. So a huge portion of your life, enjoy it. You know, you want to come
Yeah.
home to your family. I've been in a job I absolutely hated. I've been in a job I really enjoyed, and I've been in a job I really hated. And I've seen both ends of the spectrum. And it was a joy to go to work every day when I enjoyed it. And it was an awful thing to go out the door to the job that I despised. It was a great learning curve for me. And I didn't stay at that job very long, to be fair. But
we've all been there. We've all had that experience.
Yeah, and it was a good it was a good experience. It made me really wake up to the way I've seen poor management. I've seen really good management, and it's so enlightening. You've got to see both ends of the spectrum to get a balance. And yeah, I'm glad it was a learning curve. I certainly wouldn't want to do it again.
Any of us would, but I think relevant to what we're talking about, because candidates nowadays, when they're actually job seeking, that's actually where they come from. They come from a position of, well, why should I go and work for this business? They don't come from a position of, oh, I really need to sell myself to this business. It's very, very, very different nowadays, the recruitment world, to how it was, you know, even 5 to 10 years ago. And so companies now have to be seen to be doing something different in order to entice the right people and to attract, not just to attract, but to retain the right people as well. And so if you can be seen as doing something different, that's going to set you aside from the others as well.
Yeah, definitely. And probably as a little aside on the end of that really great bit of advice you've given there, more and more we're hearing and seeing the entitlement mentality coming to the fore. And you know, there's all big discussions about it. It's a very topical subject, but it's becoming this world of people now coming to an employer and saying, well, I'm coming to do you a favour. You know, here I am, you need me, I'm doing you the favour, you're not doing me any favours. So it's almost turned completely on its head from the Victorian age, you know, the employer hanging over you like Ebenezer Scrooge. But how do you deal with that mentality? Because that obviously, that's something that isn't always necessarily visible on set, but is there a way that you get to dig that out and bring that to the surface? Because that's really important, the entitlement mentality.
Yeah. It is, and I would say it's more difficult to do that if you are just going to do interviews.
Yeah.
But I think people who tend to have that as a personality trait, that will come out if you do something other than interviewing them. If you put them with other people, particularly nowadays, they soon learn that actually the way to get through this process is by collaboration. This is not via me being in competition with candidate X that sat next to me. And so they tend to quickly find out actually that temperament and that way of thinking is just not going to get them through the process. I think it's right for candidates to be picky. I think it's right for candidates to think, well, why should I come and work for your organisation?
Yes.
But I think it's about getting balance. I think it's about getting the balance right between well, what can you offer me, Mr. Employer, as opposed to, well, I'm doing you a favour coming and working in your organisation, because it's a very, that's a very dangerous game to play, because there's always going to be somebody better than you sat next to you potentially that knows a little bit more than you do.
No, absolutely. No, that's brilliant. There's some really good points in there. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So that should hopefully transition us into our next tip.
Yeah. Yes, hopefully it should. So our next tip is around inductions, and it's around what can you do actually to send the right and lasting impression on somebody as you're about to employ them. You know, you've got to offer stage, you found your perfect candidate, but what you're now thinking about is, well, they've not even started with us yet, so what can we do in order to make sure that we send the right first impression that makes them want to stay? Because it's not just about recruiting people, it's about what can we do to really integrate this person you know, effectively into our organization. It's a daunting prospect starting a new job. No matter how confident you are, I would argue that it's a really, really daunting prospect. And so what you're trying to do is you're trying to come up with something that's going to integrate somebody quickly and effectively and that works for them. So my first tip is to have a plan in the first place, because you wouldn't believe how many organizations I talk to that don't even have an induction plan. So you've got to get the basics right, which is, and I know this is going to sound really Jack and Jill, but I'm going to say it anyway, which is make sure that the person's got a place to sit, a desk even, and make sure they've got all the right equipment that they need to do the job. You know, even if you're employing somebody that's not necessarily going to have a desk, maybe they're going to work remotely, then make sure they've got the right equipment to do the job. You know, those are the basic things that you absolutely need to think about even before they've started with you. But have a plan. It's definitely my absolute must-have. You must have a plan, even if it's a bare bones of a plan. Please have a plan. And on that plan should be things like, well, you know, what training is this person going to need to be able to do their job effectively? What are the key deliverables as well, actually, that I've come up with in my head as Mr. Recruiter? What are the things I'm going to judge this person's success by in 3 to 6 months' time? And have I built that introduction plan? Have I built a way that they're going to get to that quickly? So have a think about that as well in terms of your plan. If you can, think about assigning them a buddy. So somebody that's a go-to person for them if they've got any challenges or any issues that they might face, somebody that they know that they can go and ask those questions to. We coach all of our new employees, new appointees with our customers. We're all trained coaches in our organisation, and so we coach people. We're classed as an external coach for them for the first 3 months of their employment. If you can do that, if you can assign somebody an external coach, for them to talk to anything that they've got going on that they really don't feel that they can go to their new employer with, some stuff that they might just need some help with, then that's even better for you. But on their first day, I would give them a plan of what you plan to do for them in their first days, weeks, months, but also ask them before they're joining you, what would work for you here? You know, what do you want to do in your first few days, weeks, months? And even ask somebody that's just been through the same induction plan a few weeks, months, or whatever ago, and see, did that work for them? And if there's any improvements that can be made. You know, there's no better way to keep improving something than speaking to somebody that's been through a similar process. And if you've already put somebody through an induction plan and you thought it worked really well, well, then it might actually not have worked that well. So let's check in with the person that's just been through it and see if it did work well and what improvements can be made. But give that person a plan on their first day. Give them a program of, look, this is where we're going to focus our attention with you on the first couple of weeks. And it might involve product training. It might involve time with other departments, time with other people in that organization. But give them that time, because they can then have a sort of a much clearer idea of where their role fits into the wider context.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to what you mentioned earlier, you were saying about you know, making sure they've got a desk and a chair. And you know, I've heard horror stories, you know, people starting somewhere and they're just saying, oh, well, you better sort of sit yourself over there for the time being, and we'll try and get you a computer, we'll try and get you something so you can get up and running. And they end up...
Listen, it goes on much more than you would expect. You know, generally, most companies these days, that's certainly companies that I talk to, have got an induction plan in place. It might need a little bit of tweaking, and it might need tweaking tweaking for each individual person, you know, because let's face it, everybody learns at different rates. Everybody picks things up much quicker or much slower than others. And so your induction plan should be tailored towards the individual and towards the role. But that you've just mentioned, that's happened to me, you know, and you absolutely know that what's happened is that you've had your offer of employment, you've signed on the dotted line, and then you've been forgotten about until your first day. And then you're greeted by HR first day, and they're like, "Oh God, we forgot you were starting today." You know, that's just not the way that you want to be leaving a lasting impression on somebody when you're bringing them into your organisation, because you're already on the back foot if you're at that point.
Absolutely. You don't feel too wanted when all that starts happening.
Yeah, the more that you can do to prepare, and the more that you can do to involve them, I would say, in that induction plan, to get them to give you feedback on what's going to work for them. I mean, obviously it needs to be that you need to get the balance right, and you want to be giving them some information as well. But I think it's all about what can we do to make this, you know, give the right impression to this person on their first day, to make them want to stay with us, and to help them to integrate quickly, and to make it less daunting than it usually is starting a new job.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you touched on feedback earlier as well, and feedback, you know, is so key. Whatever you do, if you can get feedback, it's just such valuable information that can really give you the basis to work on, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, because it's real. You know, you can try and make assumptions about how things are going, but there's absolutely no better way than to ask questions.
Yeah, and to do that in an environment as well that is that you can give good, honest feedback, because I think the biggest fear is, you know, you still got this, you know, the draconian organisation is gonna, you know, I can't say too much or they're gonna kick me out the door, you know.
No, it needs to be done in such a way that the person feels comfortable to be able to give that honest feedback. But it could just literally be something as simple as, look, you know, we're learning this as well. We're trying to make our inductions the best that they could possibly be. And so if we can involve you in that, the person that's just been through it, warts and all, please tell us how it was, and ensure that they are in a place where they can feel comfortable giving that feedback. I mean, it's ridiculous to ask for feedback, but then not be happy about the feedback that you get. You don't ask for it in the first place if that's how you react to it. I mean, it's silly, I know, and we laugh, but it happens so much.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, someone says, "We want your honest feedback," and then all of a sudden you find yourself in front of a desk with someone, and they're like, "Oh right, I've been reading your feedback, and we've got a few issues to raise." And it's like, whoa, don't ask for it in the first place if that's your attitude. So yeah, you've got to be open-minded about the whole process, haven't you?
You have to treat this as whatever feedback you're asking your either potential new employee or your existing employees, whatever feedback you're asking them for, whether it's inductions or not, is a gift. They're giving you a gift of how to make something better for the next time. And if you approach it in that way, then you shouldn't be bothered about asking for feedback.
No, absolutely. No, I think that's critical. And you know, that induction process, it's not induction. People think of induction as, oh right, your first week we'll do blah blah blah. An induction process is, you know, it's weeks, months down the line, and
it can a long time to get through an induction. Obviously role dependent, depending upon how quickly you want this person to hit the ground running. But I think it needs to be ever changing, your induction program. Put it together, give it to the person that's starting with you, get their feedback on it, work with it, but keep having regular check-ins with that person throughout that induction. It may be that some of the stuff that's on there isn't working for them, or it needs to be done in a different way. There's no point in just giving it to them and then expecting it all to just work miraculously. You need to be having regular check-ins with that person. You might give them a 2-week induction program, and they need another 2 weeks because it's just not worked, or there's something that they need some extra time with. I mean, clearly, if things are taking too much time, there's obviously maybe a conversation needs to be had. But again, it's about getting the balance right between, should they be further on than this now, or is it fair actually? Do they need some more time? Get some feedback of the other people that they've been working with throughout that induction. You know, it's impossible to think that somebody is going to start on day one and make a difference straight away. There's so much stuff to learn when you're starting a new job that we take for granted when we're already working in an organisation. Actually, we take for granted that people are going to know everything there is to know about us on their first day, and that's just not going to happen.
No, that's true. That's true. And I would assume there's some sort of element in there where you perhaps try and get the candidates into the right mindset that they can't come in and tell this new organisation in a couple of days how to, reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
And I think we're all guilty of that. You know, we go in somewhere and we go, oh my goodness, they do that like that. They do that like that. That's terrible. What's going on? And your inclination is to go, oh, you stop doing that immediately and change. So you've got to have the bedding in period. So yeah, I think there's some good balancing points in there. And I think
there are. And people may come into your organisation with much better ideas of how to do things just because you've been doing something or a process, or just because you've been doing something in a certain way for 10 years doesn't necessarily mean it's the best way. It absolutely may be the best way because you've done other tried and tested things, and that's the way we do things here. But it may be that somebody comes in with completely fresh ideas about how to do things, and actually what they're saying, you know, you need to pay attention to it. So I think it's about being open-minded as well.
Yes, on both sides of the table, definitely. That there is that balance within the spectrum of it. That you've got to make a place where it's visually people can see you're open-minded and open and welcoming to new ideas. Yeah. So they've got that freedom to give it, because too many people sit on really good ideas because they've got that, I can't say too much. So yeah, that's a really good point. There's a real balance within that, I think.
There is.
Yeah.
People feel much more empowered if you actually take on board the things that they're coming up with, their suggestions. They also feel a lot more looked after and feel like you care about them. As I mentioned earlier on, candidates feel very uncared for throughout the recruitment process. So whatever you can do to make them feel like they're being looked after is always going to be a good thing. Yeah,
absolutely. And Sir Richard Branson summed that up when he says, train people well enough that they can leave, but make them feel so welcome that they want to stay. And I think
that's right.
That is the real core of business. And I think there's still so many places just missing out on that and don't truly show how much they value. They might actually genuinely value their employees, but not show it enough. And people will fall by the wayside because they just don't feel valued.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah, okay. Well, that one took a bit longer, but that was my fault, so I take full responsibility for that. Quite a few questions I had to ask on that one. So, what is our next tip?
I think we've got to our tips.
That's fantastic. That's me not paying full attention. See, so I'm getting carried away. In that. I was enjoying that obviously way too much there. So that's brilliant. Thanks ever so much for those tips. Sorry, carry on.
All right, there is one thing actually that I suppose it's an overarching tip about all of the things that we've discussed, which is recruitment isn't easy, and people approach recruitment in thinking that it is, and thinking that they find key people and retain key people and it's an easy process to go through. It absolutely isn't. And so the best piece of advice that I can give any organisation is If you haven't got a dedicated recruitment function in your business, if you haven't got a recruitment manager, or you haven't got somebody that is dedicated to just doing recruitment, then bring an expert in. Because all too often when we work with businesses who are struggling, it's because they've expected their line manager or their department head to do their own recruitment. And it doesn't work. You know, your sales director should be being the sales director. He shouldn't be looking for his new recruiting his new sales manager and the sales team. That's not what he's there to do. He's there to be the sales director. And all too often, time is taken up with these key people who are trying to do recruitment and they haven't got a clue where to start. So I suppose that's my overarching tip for the whole process is bring an expert in if you haven't got a dedicated recruitment function in your organisation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, you know, I've been there before, been in positions where, you know, I was a manager and all of a sudden I've got to start interviewing candidates. I'll be very honest, I hadn't got a clue about to learn from the ground up. And, you know, we compiled a list of questions and various things, but you know, I look back on it now. At the time, it seemed pretty good. Like most decisions, they're always really good when you first make them. It's only when you look back you realise they were a bad one. And you know, there's every man to his trade. If you pull in an expert in a field, they're going to do that job so much better. And companies look at, we're going to have to pay for that. Yeah, you are. But that's because then you're going to get the best candidate and it's going to work. So, you know,
that attitude that you've just said there about, we're going to have to pay extra for that, or we're going to even have to pay for that. Absolutely you are, because guess what? If you get it wrong, you'll pay for it over.
Yes.
So look at it from this. Yes, I might have to pay a little bit more, or I might actually have to pay somebody to do this. But you know what? It'll be money well spent if you get it right, because believe me when I say it'll be catastrophic if you get it wrong.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, couldn't agree more with that one. Couldn't agree more, definitely. Excellent. So thank you ever so much for your time on that. I did pre-warn you I was going to throw a few questions at you.
Yeah.
So, and now's the time I'm going to throw them at you. So,
all right.
Question.
Fire away.
But the first one is, if you had to start again from scratch with very little money, no contacts, what would be your first action steps?
Well, to be honest with you, if I was going to start again, I'd really, really want to consider what I'm passionate about. What do I absolutely love doing? What business or industry am I really, really passionate about? And you know, you've got to start from the ground up. I'd probably do something similar to what I've done to get to where I am today, which is started from the ground up. You've got to, if you want to be, and if you decide that you want to be the leader of an organization, let's say that's what you decide you want to do, well, then you've got to learn everything that there is to know about that business. You've also got to learn everything that there is to know about every element of that business, from the person that greets you in reception to the cleaner to right the way up to the top. You've got to understand all of those roles within a business and to understand how each one plays its part within your business. I've pretty much done every job that I could conceivably think of, from picking radishes in a farm to being a Saturday girl in a little cafe. But you know what? It's all great grounding for later on in life. You know, all of the stuff that you learn throughout your life, it basically helps you when you get to where you want to be. And I just don't think there's any better training for you than to start from the ground up. I honestly believe that everyone makes a difference in an organisation, no matter how junior or how senior you are. So for me, if I was starting again, find something I'm passionate about, learn from the bottom all the way to the top.
Absolutely, 100% with you on that one. And I think something that that seems to have crept in quite a lot to society. I mean, I'm 48 now, so I sort of grew up in schooling in the 70s and 80s, and you were sort of, back then, you were fed in at a fairly young age. What do you want to do when you're older? It's changing. I hear adverts for universities saying, well, even if you don't know what you want to do, come along and do a course that you really enjoy. And all right, I get the fundamentals of that, but actually, the people that I see really focused, and I know I've had conversations with a local entrepreneur, James Sinclair, about similar subjects, that when a child knows what they want to do, when they're 6 years, and I know people like this. I was a bit different. I wanted to be an airplane driver until someone pointed out that it was a pilot. And then when I got into senior school, bank managers earn lots of money, so I wanted to be a bank manager. And then all of a sudden, someone got a technical drawing board out when I was about 13 or 14, and I fell in love with engineering, like, within a matter of weeks. And I was totally transformed. Now, I've never even seen technical drawing until that point. These things aren't put in front of people to give them a taster. We talk about options when we're 13 or 14. What about options when you're 8 or 9? Give you something, let people experience everything.
Yeah.
And I know people that have said from like the age of 6 they want to be a doctor. And they're through university now. Their whole life was focused. When they were at school, they didn't mess about because they knew what they wanted to do. And I think it's missing a lot in society now. People don't know what they want to do. They just think, oh, well, I just want to get some money. That's not what life's about. No, life's not about.
We all know. That's what we said before. You can have the highest paid job in the world, but if you hate it, then you'll absolutely detest going to work every morning. It becomes less about money, and it should always be less about money. It should just be finding something that you love, because it's like you never have to go to work if you find something that you love.
100%. You'll never work another day in your life. Not
exactly.
At all. Yeah. Absolutely. And, from my own experience, I'm doing now what I love. I'm passionate about it. I haven't worked for a long time because I get up every morning, I'm out of that bed as soon as I wake up, and I'm ready to go because I'm looking forward to every aspect of the day. I'm filled with dread going out the door. I've had those feelings, and it's terrible.
It's so awful when your life's like that. It's just it's soul destroying. It really is.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's too many people pounding out the corporate hamster wheel with that exact feeling. And my heart goes out to them. And hopefully, they can listen to what we're saying now and make a change, because it's never too late to make a change. Never. So absolutely.
It never is too late.
No, so brilliant. So some really good first action steps there. I like that. Find what you're passionate about. Find your passion. Find something you really enjoy, because if you can do that for 60 years, you've had fun. And the American Constitution, there's that bit, the pursuit of happiness. And I'm just so fascinated about that. They put that in all that time ago. That is what life is about. Pursuing happiness, having a happy life.
Yes,
it's fulfilling. So really good answer to that question. Really good. So now the second question is in 2 bits. So what have been the most groundbreaking moments in your life purpose and success? And let's talk about the hardest moment and also the best moment as well.
Sure. Hardest moment for me definitely has to be being a single mum. I was thrown into being a single mum many years ago, but without a shadow of a doubt, probably one of the hardest moments for me. It meant that I had to have a complete change of life, purpose, direction, and everything changed literally from the moment that I realised I was going to be a single mum. I'm very lucky. I'm happily married now, and you know, my daughter's 19. And in some ways, I have a huge amount to be thankful to her for, because it meant that I did take stock of where I was, what I was doing. Did I want to carry on doing the same thing? Did I want to do something else? And so it gave me that kind of pick up the bum, I suppose, in a way, to go off and actually think about what I wanted to do with my life. Because your life does change when you have children. And as I say, I wouldn't change it for the world, by the way. I absolutely wouldn't make I wouldn't make a completely different decision. I would do exactly everything as I did. But it's one of the best things that I've done, but it was also it's a massive challenge. And anybody that brings up a child on their own for them first few years of their life, it's really, really hard. It's really difficult to have to start again, because it's effectively what I had to do when I went back to work after I had her. We've also had in business, you know, we've had some tough times. Recruitment is always going to be one of those businesses that hits tough times. We'll never get away from the peaks and troughs that we have in recruitment. But there was a big lesson that we learned a few years ago, which was one of our biggest customers actually, that brought in a third of our recruitment income, actually decided that they weren't going to use agencies anymore. Not just us, they used other agencies as well. And that they were going to do all of their own recruitment in-house. And so it literally meant that a third of our income was literally taken. The rug was completely pulled from under us. But it was a massive lesson learned, actually. It was a massive lesson in don't be complacent about business, and don't be complacent about repeat business either, because you just never know the moment that all that could be taken away from you. So it was a huge lesson learned for us in making sure that you're looking after all of your customers and not just servicing the ones that you think you're going to get that repeat business from. Couple of hard moments in my life, but definitely stuff that's challenged me in a good way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's never assume or presume. And no, we can always do that very easily. Oh yeah, we've got this client, you know, they're never going to go anywhere else. Seen that before. And you know, other customers get put by the wayside. They then get the ump and go, and then the big one pulls the plug, and you're left with hardly anything. And it's a really dangerous situation. You know, good lesson to learn, but can be a very costly one. So, and if you're not winning, you're learning, which is, and as long as you do, as long as those situations arrive and you do actually learn from them and don't make that same mistake again, then it's all for the good, and progress can be made. Okay, sure. So so your best moment?
Oh, it's got to be my most recent, certainly from a business perspective, is becoming the MD. That's only happened recently. That only happened from April this year. So co-owner and MD happened. Co-owner and MD happened not long ago. I mean, that's hugely rewarding when you started off in an organisation as a PA and moved through the ranks and sort of shown your worth, really, to have that recognised. To be offered that position because of the work that you've done and the efforts that you put in have been recognised, and to have that that trust from the original co-owner, for him to sort of recognise that I've got a passion for this and I can make this work. So for someone to basically more or less say to you, look, I realise how fabulous you are, let's do this, is hugely rewarding, especially after. It was a complete change of career for me, as you said before. I started off in the legal secretarial world, and there I thought I would stay. Didn't particularly enjoy it, but it paid the bills, like we were saying earlier. So to have this kind of complete different change of career, start from the bottom again, find that I had a huge passion for it, and that I got a huge enjoyment out of it, to be where I am now, it's such a fantastic feeling. It's very challenging, of course, when the buck stops with you, and the choices that you make will either make or break it, but I'm absolutely relishing the challenge at the moment.
Fantastic. And again, we touched on it earlier, it's never too late to change. You could have said, okay, well, put all this effort into training as you know, a legal secretary. So how can I ever leave the industry? I've invested so much time in it, but you can, and that's the key. It really is
Yeah,
the key.
I've bumped into people that that I used to work with and for. When they've asked me what I'm doing now, and I tell them that I'm running my own business, the look of shock on their faces is quite another reward, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah.
Because I think you do get pigeonholed, and I think when you leave an organisation, people just expect you to carry on doing much the same thing as you've always done. So
Yeah.
it's a great feeling to be able to know that the work that you've put in has had its reward and its recognition at the end.
Yeah, no, absolutely fantastic, and that's a really good story. I think that people can relate to that. You know, you can get
Yeah,
into a job and you can really be passionate about an industry or something. I was an engineer. I'm not in engineering anymore. I'm in the cost consultancy industry, but I loved engineering and I enjoyed my journey in it. But for me now, my passion isn't there anymore. I've moved forward. It's business, it's
yeah,
entrepreneurialism, and so it's a transition, and you move and you flow, and that's what you do. And I think that's
yeah,
that's where people sometimes do lose out. You've got to move.
yeah.
You do evolve. And we shouldn't think that we won't evolve. So yeah,
I
some
think that we
good points
either. I
there.
think I think sometimes we kind of get stuck into a job or stuck into a position, and we've done
Yeah.
that for such a long time that we think, I'm not even necessarily sure I'm brave enough actually to do something else. And sometimes we're forced into it, which is kind of what happened with me when I had my daughter. I was forced into making that change, really. I no longer wanted to be the person that was missing out on all of her childhood by being never at home most of the time, because I was spending most of my time traveling to and from work, missing out a huge amount on her life. And so it forced me to make a change.
Yeah.
I probably would have made the change anyway, if I'm being completely honest, but it forced me into that, which has, now reaped its rewards. So I think my advice is, anybody that is thinking, I'm not necessarily sure I love doing this anymore, then do something else. Because, nobody else will do it for you. You've got to do it yourself.
Absolutely, 100%. And just taking a quick step back, you spoke about your struggles as a single mum.
Yeah.
So if you had something to say, because possibly is going to be some single mums or single dads, single
Yeah.
parents
Yeah.
that are watching this, because it is tough, very tough. What
Certainly.
what encouraging words could you say to them?
I would say that whatever you're doing is right. I used to absolutely beat myself up when Olivia was tiny, that I was doing everything wrong. She's my only child. I've never had any other children, but I tended to sort of beat myself up all of the time and think, oh, I could have done that better, or I didn't do that very well, and if I was going to do that again, what would I do differently? Just be accepting that whatever you're doing right, because none of us get it right 100% of the time. I know I didn't get it right 100% of the time, but give yourself a break, because what you're doing is right. Because whatever decisions you're making as a single parent, you'll be making them for your child. That's how I approached it. Every decision I made about my career and about my life choices were made thinking about, well, how is this going to affect Olivia's life and my life, and is it going to be good or bad? But whatever you are doing as a single parent, I promise you, whatever you're doing right, and to not beat yourself up for anything that you might think you could have done better.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Brilliant tip there, a brilliant tip, because I think there's too much of that nowadays. People
Yeah.
are beating themselves up over stuff. There's no need,
No, it's
no one
time
is
as well.
perfect.
Just give them time. It's nothing to do with, for me, being a single mum, particularly when you're the only breadwinner, you're the only person bringing money into the house. It's not about material things. It's nothing to do with material things, material possessions. Kids just want your time. That is all they want. And so as much of that you can possibly give to them in those early years particularly will make a world of difference when they're older. As I say, my daughter's now 19, and I have created the monster that she is, because she now lives her life by my rules, which are do what you love, don't pigeonhole yourself into what anybody else thinks you should be. She decided after 3 months of university it wasn't for her, and that she's just going to go off and do a few things and decide what she actually wants to do with the rest of her life. And so, as I say, my only advice to anybody else that's going through it is give them the time that they want. Don't be worrying about material things, because kids don't care about that. And whatever you're doing right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, really good tips there. Really good tips indeed. And I think so true. I was very fortunate in my younger days that my own dad and one of my bosses at the time said, make sure you have time with your kids, because you'll never get that time back, and you'll always look back and regret that you could have had that bit more time with them. And I followed that to the letter. And, you know, I remember doing crazy stuff. I was doing site fitting at one time, working from, I don't know, 7:30 in the morning till about 9 o'clock at night. So my boys used to wake up early. So I'd get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. We'd have breakfast at 5:30. And we lived near the seafront, and we'd down the seafront, building a sandcastle at 6 o'clock in the morning. And it was fantastic. Everyone like looked over the sea wall like, what on earth is going on there? But that was the time. And we did that nearly every morning. And it was just things that you could never, you know, the youngest is 21 now. They certainly won't want to be doing that now.
That's the things that children remember. They'll remember that. They'll have that memory or that experience much more than they'll remember what you bought them for Christmas 3 years on the trot. So I think that's the stuff that's the most important, is the time that you spend with them and creating those memories with them. I'm a huge believer in that. Even now, you know, my daughter's 19, and I still try to spend as much time with her as possible.
Yeah, that's right. Because there'll come a time when they won't want to spend too much time with you, so make the most of it while you can. No, excellent. Okay, so thanks very much for those brilliant tips that you've given today, and answering those questions. Really good insight. So please, Claire, could you tell the audience the best way that they can get in touch with you?
The best way to get in touch with me is 2 ways, either by email or via my mobile telephone number. I spend a lot of my time on the road, travelling between either assessment days or visiting customers. So mobile and email are definitely the best way to get hold of me.
Okay, fantastic. And so what was your email address?
So my email address is claire@untappedpotentiallimited.co.uk. Claire is spelled CLAIRE. And my mobile number is 07974 379 264.
Excellent. I was going to jump in there and say, spell Claire, because there's about 4 different spellings for Claire, I think. So, no, well done. You beat me to that one. So no, thank you ever so much, Claire. Now, to our audience, now remember, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Today, you've been spending time with Claire Farley. You've been spending time with me as well. But thank you for spending time with us today, Claire.
Thank you very much indeed. It's been my absolute pleasure.
Thank you for spending time with us today. This has been brought to you by the Case Mastermind Group. Please be sure to follow us in the links to this message. Please give your real, honest feedback on what you have just heard and share what you enjoyed or liked the best. We really do check the feedback that we receive. Please also share with your friends who you believe could benefit from it, just to show you care. To our listeners, remember, no matter where you are on the mountain of success. Let's enjoy the journey together to the top. We will see you there, my friends.